Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Above Average Black Men. Yours truly, Chris Pender Sr. Got a special guest tonight. So Chris Jr. is traveling and Devin is en route. So I got to make sure I say what they always say: like, follow, subscribe. But hey, we got a great show planned for you tonight, man. I'm super excited about it because this topic is something that's kind of been weighing heavy on my heart. And I know Gary here, man, is a little radical. So I know this is right up his alley. I know he got a little, but I know you're passionate about what we're going to talk about. So what we're going to talk about is, and then you can introduce yourself. We're going to talk about have we lost or gained ground as African Americans and as African American men. Mm-hmm. And before vacation, we talked about was NAACP still relevant? You know, so this kind of ties into it because some of the things that we shared about why young people don't think is relevant kind of ties into what we're talking about today, because I think a lot of young people don't really know the history. They don't really know the role that the NAACP played. So introduce yourself, bro. We're going to get right into this, man.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Bryant. And just to give you a little background history, I'm recently retired about 3 years ago from the city of Philadelphia. Worked for 3 city controllers and also was a union official, treasurer for District Council 47 and Local 2187. So I have a lot of experience dealing with the inner workings with the government in the city.
So anyway, we're going to get into this topic, man, because I know he can talk about the city too. So the question is, it's $1 million question. And I'll tell you for me where it stems from. And I'll give it to you on both sides. One, I give it to you from the Christian aspect, because the church used to be the place that started all this. All those conversations about civil rights, about equal rights, started within the church building. And now we have more churches, more powerful churches, but now all of a sudden we're talking about church, separation of church and state, which I'll get into the true meaning of that as we go and do. But it's just ironic how church is no longer that place. So I'm not bashing churches. I just
you're dealing with reality, the truth.
Because I believe, and this is a whole nother show. One of the things I've been struggling with is we talk a lot about in church is salvation and sin, but there's not a lot of in between being discussed. I know a lot of brothers who struggle in their marriage. I talk to them, they text me, who don't feel comfortable talking to their pastor or don't feel comfortable having that discussion in church. Brothers tell me all the time, I want to talk to somebody, but my wife just, doesn't get it. And so we're going to talk about that because I think this goes into what we talk about, isn't it?
Exactly. I'm right.
Yeah. So
real.
So there's a lot to unpack. So I'm starting with the church because, when we were growing up, that was the place where politicians came into the community. They went to the church. You want to get elected?
You actually saw them in your community.
But they walked when they went to the church. Right. But it's changed now.
Right.
So do you think we've lost ground or gained ground? And when it comes to civil rights, when it comes to African Americans and African American men in general?
Well, I think we've lost a lot of ground. That's my personal opinion. You just look at society and the way we're treated and the way we're depicted as Black men.
I think, let's get into that, because not even that, the way we depicted, but men in general is crazy because, I didn't watch it, but apparently Florida has a commercial that's running right now that talks about masculinity is toxic. So I just saw somebody, I'm not a news person. So I just, and stuff like that, I was trying to wait to see it. Then I said, you know what? I don't even want to put this in my system, man.
Right.
But I want to talk about that because you said something that I think is huge. I think even amongst our race, the way we portrayed, the way we're thought of, man, it's just so negative.
Exactly. And, I have a lot of conversations with my male counterparts, and a lot of us are going through the same thing and having the same experiences at church in our marriages. And I'm going like, wow, I thought this was just Gary, but it's not. You know what? And I don't want to bash the church per se, but I'm just going to say, as a Black man, it's a lot lacking that we don't get.
Well, let me say this. We're not bashing the church. We're not criticizing the church. We're critiquing the church.
Right.
And churches can be critiqued. And to me, the difference is when you criticize, you don't have solutions. You're just trying to attack. We're critiquing because we are going to talk about some solutions. And you said something that was we could probably do a whole show around what you just said, because my background, I talk to a lot of guys. We got
Yes,
to call
I
on
know.
Monday,
Mhm.
and I work with guys, and it's a blessing and a curse to work with every population preschool to prison.
Mhm.
The blessing is, man, you get to see it. The curse is you get to see it. You get to see
Right.
how these boys go into men. But
Mhm.
you said something that's so powerful that even I think my wife doesn't quite understand when I say it to her,
Mhm.
that there's a lot of guys out there, man. Healthy guys,
Mhm.
nothing's wrong with them. Not bad guys struggling with the same thing because
Right.
the missus just doesn't get it. Not in a bad way. She just doesn't get it.
Mhm.
And church has not provided that platform where you can be vulnerable enough to say, look, hey, I'm struggling in my marriage,
Mhm.
or I'm just struggling in relationships.
When I had these discussions with other males, and I was just surprised that so many of us actually dealing with the same thing. That actually made me feel, it sounds kind of weird, I felt a little better. I said, wow, it's not just me, because I'm trying to figure this out. Why am I going through this? And I look at my background, what I've done as a husband, a father. I didn't have a father around.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you shared.
And my mother, a little 5'5"
Yeah.
woman. They said a woman can't raise a boy to be a man, but I'm a different just a little. She was tough, and what I mean by that, she didn't allow me to cower and hold my head down. She told me you have to stand up for yourself.
Yeah. She gave
you have to speak up,
foundation.
because I was real introverted. I'm only child, so I was extremely introverted. She said, "Look, you come in the house telling me so and so one more time, and I can't say what she said." She says, "It's going to be me and you."
Yeah.
And from that day on, I just went forward with it.
But I think what happens is those days are gone.
Mm-hmm.
So not in general. I think women do a great job, but every man's going to find some man to affirm him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where the women plays a role is hopefully to make sure they find the right man to affirm him and not Joe down the street.
Yeah.
But I think when I talk about African American men, we used to be held to such high esteem in our community. And I'll back it up by saying, when anybody came in to attack our community, they attacked the men first. That's what they did.
Right.
Hence, that's how Malcolm X got his strength.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, but he got men. He realized that they're tearing down our community by our men, by introducing drugs to our men, by getting our men to turn on our women, getting our men to turn on, to not be empowered, to not think education, those things were important. And I think we don't understand that. So I fast forward why I think we lost ground is because I think there's a lot of women who their definition of manhood is skewed. So therefore, a man can be vulnerable. A man can say, I'm struggling with these things. And it's an issue because I think church has kind of created that same environment. And when I say church, let me make this clear. I don't know every church. I'm not speaking about every church.
You're talking about the
but
church.
when I speak to church, the church is one entity.
Right.
And so people need to understand that. But I see we have lost ground because trash men used to be held at a high esteem. And then we had suits on. They were, it wasn't about what they did. They went to work every day. They took care of their family. And they had a certain stature in their community. I no longer see that.
No. In my opinion, as a black man, we don't get the respect that we should get and that we're due.
Yeah.
As I look at all my friends I grew up with, and it's funny, my closest friends that I grew up with, we all ended up working for the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And we all ended up retiring, and we took care of our families. We bought homes, we did all that, but yet we continue to get bashed. The media, they always depict this negative image of us. And it goes all the way back, to me, it goes back to slavery. When we came here, they emasculated the black man in front of his family. He couldn't protect his family. So our women looked at us a certain way. That's my opinion.
No, I agree.
And our children, because we couldn't do anything.
But I fast forward because I had this discussion with a bunch of different people. I blame us for that because we pile on. We don't say. Nobody says, "Well, my husband's not like that." Nobody says my sons are not like that. Right. Nobody, especially people in the media or hot places who have a voice. They don't say, well, I got 20 friends and none of them are like that. The bad stuff comes out and nobody combats it. Nobody turns around and challenges it. And so, and you can say what you want to say, hence the social media, it proves it. Media is powerful. It's not even about truth.
Definitely.
It's not even about truth. It's not about reality. It's about whatever narrative they want to put out there becomes the truth. It becomes the reality.
And that's what we're up against. Because they put that narrative out. But the sad thing is now some of our younger young men, they haven't had the opportunity to even have a man around to teach them and show them what it is to be a real man. It's all coming from that, female. Even though I was a single My mother
No, I get what you're saying.
she was a single mother. We had older guys in the community. I grew up down the hood, 38th and Aspen, Manchester.
Yeah.
Back in the day when they had the gang war situation going on, you know what they did?
Yeah.
All of my friends, we played ball. Herman Rice, I love him. He had a lot of activities for us. We had basketball teams, football teams. Well, we went on trips. I mean, we were living like, wow, this is great. When I got older and I go back down and see some of my friends, and I would see some of the guys that were out there gang war, they came over to me, one of them in particular, his nickname was Flint. He said, Gary, let me say something to you. He said, you know what? Remember when we used to get ready to get it on and everything? We made y'all go in the house. They made us go in the house.
Yeah, I know. I remember.
They made us go in the house.
There's a couple guys
They said, y'all go in the house. You guys go in the house because we get ready to get it on.
Yeah.
Hey, what do? We was in the house.
But I think
they looked out for us.
But I think that's another thing that's lost in the community. The sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a sense of community. My dad, everybody knew him as Big John. There was nowhere I could go in to see that nobody did not know him his last name.
Mm-hmm.
So I had no choice but to act right.
You better not act up because it's going to get back to your father.
But back then, people's last names had a lot of respect. Back then it was different, and I say it because I think some of the stature we lost as men, and we talked about this on another show, is that we don't highlight the ones who are doing good things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why we've taken a step back, and then even within the community, we pile on. It always seems to come into the topic on this show. One thing people do is like women, they pit black women against black men. So you get black women, not all, but get on TV, my baby father, and so this image becomes a narrative behind black men.
Exactly, and it's a substantial amount that do that.
Yeah.
So we're up against, as a black man, we're up against a lot. Some men might turn to they might turn to drinking. They might even turn to using drugs or things like that. Not saying that's an excuse, but it's like how much pressure, how much can you take? I thank God for giving me the strength that I had to deal with what I've had to deal with, to be honest with you. Because I could have very easily went down that other path.
Yeah.
But my mother, I think about it. She was I was afraid of that little woman. And she demanded respect, and I gave her that respect.
So why do you, and I did say like, follow, subscribe. I got you for you.
Cool.
So why do you think we lost ground? Because I agree with you, and the question was, have we lost ground as African Americans and as African American men? And a lot of that ground means how we're viewed in society and things of that nature. So it's because it's funny because we have more clout, so to speak.
Yeah.
We have more vehicles that have a voice. It's funny because I was watching, they have this history of blacks in Hollywood. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I was watching some of the highlights. And some of the stuff they said made me really think about it, as I was preparing for the show. Because they said people have no idea the power that we have, the talent that we have, how much we contribute to Hollywood, which you could take Hollywood out and say to this country, and we need to learn how to use our voice. And this is a celebration. This is a vehicle we can begin to use our voice. So if we could imagine why we can't do that as a community.
Well, because I don't want to name
no names. We don't get
I'm not naming no names. But I'm going to say some of the programming.
Yeah.
That's on that Tell Live Vision, as I call it. It's not a television, it's a Tell Live Vision. Our young mothers and people are watching that. Then you have the music. That's all contaminating people's minds. And so when I go out in the street, that's what I see. Like a young lady, you don't have to dress like that. Dress like a lady. And the guys, the same thing.
But how do you know? And I got a question for Devin. Mm-hmm. How do you dress like something you don't know? Like, for instance, I do restorative circles. And one of my pet peeves about restorative circles sometimes is you can't restore somebody to something they don't know. So I can't go in there and say, okay, let me restore you to a proper behavior when your norm is an improper behavior. And I say that because, a lot of what we're dealing with, I'm not making excuses. They don't know. It's a young lady who works for me, and we had this conversation. She's brutally honest. She says, I don't know any different. She said, a lot of my friends get on me because I think there's a trend with some, not all. There's a trend with African American females lately where they think being loud and obnoxious is cute. Mm-hmm. They do. They think being loud and obnoxious is cute. And this, I just came from 44th year reunion we talking about. Yeah. There's people there like, come on, man, we too old for that.
Right.
So where do you think people are getting their information from, Devin? Because we talked about, it always comes up, the root of it, not the root, but a large part of the root is the media. So where do you think people in your age group are getting their information from?
I mean, I think you guys hit it on the nose pretty hard. And we say this every episode, but that's really what it is. Is like, the social media platforms, the YouTubes. You're getting force fed these different ideas, and to piggyback a little bit, it's getting to the point where, for instance, I heard when I came in, you guys were talking about children, to the point where it's like people that don't even got kids always have this negative opinion about fathers and child support, and none of them aren't there. So I always think it's from social media, where you see one instance and you just run with it and think it's the whole majority, when it's never really the case.
But also it's like you listen to the music, and even being in the schools, our children aren't getting the education they should be getting. And one of the big things we should be getting is our history of who we are.
Oh, we're going to get there.
We created modern civilization.
Yeah.
Okay, and we don't, you're finding out now, we invented this, we created that. We didn't learn, we learned some of those things, but it's a lot of stuff that's left out.
But see, this goes back to my point earlier. And I'm not blaming them in general, but the church used to be the place that united people. They're like in Florida, for instance, they rewrite history. Slavery benefited a certain group of people.
Yeah.
Like, where's the voices saying that's ludicrous? Where's the voices that's coming together saying that's just totally unacceptable? I don't hear it. But we will attack people who have a different sexual preference. We will attack.
Right. You'll be right on them.
We attack Black Lives Matters. We attack all these. But when issues like that come out, voters' rights are being suppressed, or the issue in Florida. And what I think people don't understand is, if it gets by in one state, it's going to spread. But I think people don't understand the slippery slope that, I give you the perfect example, and I'm going to get flack for this, but that's life. I said it when Roe versus Wade. I'm pro-life. I go on record saying it.
Right.
But I knew what they were trying to do, because they knew if they got enough people aboard and they could overturn Roe versus Wade, now there's no case, and there's no case out there they can't overturn. Hence, the lady who won the suit, basically it was fictitious suit, but she didn't have a business. But she sued and won, because she wanted to have the right, if she had a business, that she didn't have to marry, or that she didn't have to cater or serve people who had alternative lifestyles. And she won. No business or nothing. And they overturned. So this is the slippery, so people understand. They'll throw something out there. And they'll get you, they'll suck you in with the little okie dokie, because they knew people pro-life didn't care about any other issue, didn't pay attention to any other issue, and they jumped on it. So now you just gave these people the power to have really a dictatorship and not a democracy.
When you talk about pro-life, this is a perception I took. They're talking about pro-life. Where is your outrage about slavery and what we had to deal with and endure?
But it's your definition of pro-life.
Look what they did to us.
But it's your definition of pro-life. I agree with you. But most pro-life people only think about unborn children. They're not thinking from the womb to the grave. They thinking about, because I've had conversations. In all transparency, I used to run a pro-life organization. So I've had this conversation, and I've had it in church and different places. You're pro-life, but the very social programs that sustain life and help people stay alive, you want to cut. Like, more African-American women die for lack of prenatal care. Right. They die of childbirth than any other ethnic group. But yet you want to cut programs that would kind of offset that. That's not pro-life.
Right. But they know it affects us more.
But it's your definition.
They know that.
Your definition. And I think some people who are pro-life, and again, I'm pro-life, they know the image of a child is going to start. So they stay on that. But they don't say the image of George Floyd, Trayvon Martin. They don't share the image, or just recently I was talking where, somebody sent me something. The young black couple bought a house somewhere, and they had it built. So the owner gave them the key to go. And somebody called the cops on them. Like, you don't, even when they showed them the key, what are you doing here? So that may not be, it could have been a life death situation, but that's a quality of life. So to me, if you pro-life, all that matters. But we will get involved in that, but then we won't get engaged in anything that impacts people's lives. We don't get in and say, so I think that goes back to what we said, and we're not bashing
they're
church.
Being disingenuous, though, you know what I'm saying? They're saying they're pro-life, but you got to look at the entire scope.
But look
at what I mean? And they're not looking at that. And as a result, when we with politicians, and I look at all this, like Philly, we have a large contingent of politicians that look like us, but we're the poorest big city and the poorest education.
But this goes into the topic of the show. Get back on track. We've lost ground because when we were trying to obtain things, like before the Reconstruction Act, when we actually had black politicians, we were gaining ground.
Yes, we were.
We were gaining ground. We were actually better off before Brown versus the Board of Education. We were producing more doctors, more lawyers. We had more professional people. Now, I'm not bashing Brown versus the Board of Education, but I think this is where I think we've lost ground because we get so busy trying to assimilate. We get so busy trying to appease the masses that we become what the masses want us to be. And we don't fight we fight the battles they want us to fight. I used to work for somebody. He said, look, man, look, we know, white guy, he said, look, we know that, y'all march for 3 weeks, 6 weeks. He said, what, 3 months later? And we become that. So I think we have lost ground. We lost ground because they're taking voter rights back. We lost ground because, some states still have lynching on the books. And we haven't done anything say anything about it.
That's insane.
But that's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying how they view us as descendants of slaves. How even people internationally, how they view us. And I'm going to say something that might. We look at the Ukraine, what happened to those people and everything. We gave them hundreds of billions of dollars, or whatever. Now this is that part. Don't get me wrong. I don't mind helping anyone. They relocated these people in suburban communities and everything. There would be no America today, the wealthy country it is, without the unfortunate abuse of our people through slavery that built all this. And then they don't even talk about what we contribute, the inventions and everything else, and the minds that we contributed. We don't get that. So when do we get justice? Another thing I want to say, I love sports and entertainment. I think sometimes we got to rechannel things. I wish we would be as passionate about the injustices that we face as we do about whether the Sixers are trading this one or that one, or the Eagles are doing this or that. But I wish we had that same.
But it's on purpose.
Passion. I know. But
these are things that they put out there to distract us.
But
and get us off the issue.
It's no excuse because God gave us a brain and we can analyze and determine things, and we're not using that.
But your brain is only as good as what you put in it. So it's like if you can have the latest laptop, the latest computer, but if you don't put anything in it, if all you got on is video games, it's like how many people got smartphones and they're
not too smart.
I'm just and the iPhone. Come on, man, you get so much you can get off of this thing now. But people don't use it for that. They use it for video games. They use it for all kind of stuff. They don't use it for to do things that help increase their intellect or help them build wealth and things of that nature. And I think this is another place we lost ground because we don't value education. I think the core of this is we don't value education. The same education that people died for, that people got lynched for, that all kind of crazy stuff happened to people just because they wanted education. We no longer value. It's free and we don't value it. I'm in the school taught, and a lot of these kids, I don't care. What do you mean you don't care?
But see, go back to home again. My mother was she was an avid reader, right? She had her chair. She said that she was always reading some kind of book or novel, whatever. And she would read to me when I was young. And I have two sons, 28 and 26 now.
Yeah.
I read to them all the time. I read to them when my wife was carrying them.
Yeah.
Because I knew that reading was important. Because when my mother read to me, boy, it was like, wow. And then I would be up reading my books. She would buy books for me to read and everything. But now a lot of these parents aren't doing it. They're on that phone or whatever. Or,
audio books now.
Yeah.
But this is another reason why we lost ground, because I remember sitting in rooms about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, probably 30 years ago, and powers to be decided they weren't going to invest in high school and upper middle school anymore because it was a waste of time, because they were off the chain and everything. Well, fast forward, guess whose kids we're servicing now? Those parents who we didn't push reading on, those parents who we didn't teach about economics, who we didn't teach the importance of education, who we didn't teach about boundaries and didn't give a strong sense of right and wrong because we thought it was too late. They're now parents now. And you can't pass on what you don't have.
Because when I first met you, it was in the school district at those meetings.
Yeah, right? I started. I was doing a Bible study.
But you know what really hurt my heart?
Yeah.
Being an auditor, I had to go out and audit the federal and state grants. So I had to go out and sit in the classroom. I had a schedule with a list of teachers, and I had to go out, introduce myself to the principal, and I would, whatever, when they were free, or either I just go sit in the class and sit in the back. This broke my heart. I went into this classroom, I'm suit on, professional. I'm sitting back with a little pad, and the teacher's sitting at the desk, and I could already tell this is how this class was run every day. They were on cell phones. They were having conversations, and he was like, come on, class. I already knew this was every day. So this young man says to me, he says, hey, old head, what you doing here? I said, excuse me, young man. I said, it's sir to you.
They think that's
and women, and they, all the kids, they like, all the young people, I shouldn't have kids, all the young people, they just busted out laughing. Oh, he got you. But I was trying to make a point.
Yeah.
But, the girls were sitting on the desk. Yeah. They were on the phones. And I was sitting there with a suit on taking notes.
Doesn't matter.
This is what we're up against.
But this goes back to how we've lost ground because, we're expecting parents to give what they don't have. As opposed to saying, okay, I know it's not happening at home, so let me put something in the school system. Let me start talking about character education in the school system. Let me start talking about, giving them tools, to be prepared. Let me start by holding them accountable.
Well,
doing things like that.
Even if I'm a parent and I'm not really well educated, like when I would go to those school board meetings sometime where the parents would be there, I was at several of those meetings, and it was a lot of young people there. Yeah. And someone got up and spoke, and I'm looking around, where are their parents?
Yeah.
So if the parents don't care, the system's not going to care.
I used to go to the SRC meetings, and I was going at the time when they were closing schools because schools were underperforming. Underperforming for decades. I'm not talking about for a year.
I know.
And I would listen to and I was so embarrassed because I would listen to the parents stand up and, well, my daughter's not going to be able to go to her prom. My daughter's going to have to catch 2 buses now. My daughter's got to get up early to catch a school bus now. The school's been failing for 10 years. Your child and generations before your child are being undereducated. They're not being able to compete, and you worry about a prom. I'll never forget this lady stood up and said, because I forget what they were taking off Martin Luther King. And they put the quote, I think, who's the quote by on the wall? I can't think of it now. It'll come to you. But they put a quote by, I think, James Baldwin on the wall. Okay. And this lady stands up and says, they came in, took over the school. They put some words up on the wall. I don't know who that character is.
Wow.
Next they go change the name of the school. And I'm looking, and I was heartbroken that she didn't understand James Baldwin, was a famous Black author.
And I'm trying to think of that quote exactly because I remember it was powerful.
But I keep seeing this, and this goes back to the Bible study. There was a Caucasian person or Hispanic person that said, can you do this? There was a Black person that stopped it. That came to me and said, this is the last one. You can't do this anymore.
Back to what you were saying earlier when we talk about the church. And sometimes I get to the point I say, where is the church for real? Because back then when I had 3 heroes when I was a young man growing up too. 3 M's, Martin, Malcolm, and Medgar. All 3 of those men lost their lives trying to lift our people up. And in front of their families, basically.
Yeah.
On King's I Have a Dream speech, they always put that little part about, justice and all that. But then he said, we're going to Washington now to get our check. Yeah. And shortly after that, he was gone.
But I think the difference is, and I say this all the time, those guys, even in his dream speech, it wasn't just for him.
No, it wasn't just
He spoke about it. He spoke about for his kids. He spoke about generations, people, but he also spoke about America.
Right, there he is.
I think now a lot of politicians, it's just about them.
In their little circle.
And this is why we're losing ground because, it goes back to slavery. If I put the light-skinned, the house Negro against the field Negro and you're so busy fighting amongst each other. Meanwhile, I'm taking stuff away. I go back to, and I'm not bashing the church. I'm just right now, I told you, I'm kind of this place where I'm really on this thing where it seems like a lot, not all, we get so stuck on salvation and sin that we're not teaching people how to live. And this goes back to our early question, but what we talked about earlier about so many men are going through so many things. But also, the church used to be the place to catapult for a lot of stuff, for community organizations, for civil rights. Right? It was a place where they galvanized people, where pastors got together, they inspired people to get involved, to see change. Now, we create these buildings of separatism. And how dare you challenge my separatism by bringing a social issue into this building?
And it seems like it's really gotten more cliquish. within their body.
But that's why the body is not growing.
Right.
Because that's not what it was intended to be.
Mm-mm.
You know, if you go back and you check out Jesus and the stuff he did without getting teeth, you know, he had a holistic ministry.
Yes.
He just,
Yes, he
you know,
did.
he didn't just sit there and talk about salvation and sin.
Mm-mm.
You know, he healed Lazarus.
Mm.
You know, even the work that his disciples did, you know, they worked, they got out and did stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a message of salvation and sin. And I think that's part of the issue why we're losing ground. But even as we segue to the next point, outside the church, even Napoleon Hill said people don't know the history of doom and repeat it. And I think that's part of the problem as a people, we don't know our history. And I think that's really the huge part of the problem.
But we have a system which is, when I say allowed, they've created that monster which has allowed us to be in that position. And then on top of that, we have to be more involved to demand these type of things. And I'm just saying, I think our priorities, and I'm not trying to bash sports or entertainment anybody, but if it's a sports team or somebody, we will be out there in droves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we won't do this for our children. And then our leaders, I'm going to say this. If you're supposed to be a leader, your city council, mayor, whatever you are, and you look like me, yes, you represent all the people, but still work on the injustices that we face. Those are things that are unique to our community that you need to deal with, and it's not happening.
But it's we pick and choose our battles, and I don't know how much wisdom we use. Just like I hear people say, well, all this started happening when they took the Bible out of school. So whether we agree or disagree, but where is the fight to keep it in there? Where is the fight to say, okay, we allow them to take it out? Just like now in Florida, all this stuff is going down in Florida. People all over the country should be in an uproar about the fact that they're trying to say slavery. Blacks benefited from slavery because they learned skills.
Wait a minute.
But nobody's saying anything.
Now that right there, when I heard that, I was ready to. That is so insulting to say something like that.
But apparently not to everybody because nobody's talking about it.
Now, if you want to go back to history, we created modern civilization.
Yeah.
Okay? And a lot of these inventions, if it wasn't for us, like there were slaves that created these inventions because they wanted to make their job easier doing that farming work out there.
Yep.
But yet, did they get a patent? No. Who got the patent? Their slave owners got the patent.
But it's the way we just don't, and I don't know why. We complain about stuff that's important, but we move on stuff that's not that important. And that it's almost, that's the way we become. You know, I'll sit here and complain all day long about, for instance, you know, I'll complain all day long about the school system. I don't go to back to school night. I don't go to SRC meetings. I don't even vote. You know, I'll get in the barbershop, have these great dialogues, these great discussions. You know, I'm changing the world in the barbershop. You know, I'll get up there and do this great sermon about injustice and all the things. I do all this great stuff, but I'm not physically doing anything. You know, it's like we talk about the kids in school. You know, why aren't churches going to school? Even if it's just reading to kindergartners. I'm not saying you got to get into the middle of high school, but why? Because you teach kindergartners early. So as they grow, you know, if you go in there and read with kindergartners and you just first grade, you kind of, as they grow, you're introducing them to different types of people. You can break some of the cycles. As opposed, we just wait until they become delinquent or whatever, and now we want to talk about it.
It's too late then.
But that's my point. I don't understand how even as a society that we don't see that. I don't have 12 degrees, and I see it. So you can't tell me the powers to be don't see it. Schools like now, for instance. So I don't care what kind of money you pour into a curriculum. Some of these buildings are atrocious, man. You got
a lot of them.
It's going to be with Cheltenham till you spoil because you say Cheltenham. But imagine being in a public school with no air, and like tomorrow's going to be 96 degrees, heat index 103.
Well, you know what,
so I don't care what kind of curriculum you have. How can you learn in that environment?
They're to dismiss you from class. But I mean, you look at, when I was reading an article, like in some of those schools with the asbestos, and I mean, there was one classroom where the paint chips were falling from the ceiling, and the children were eating them, getting lead contamination. Our leadership in the city's known this for I don't know how long, but nothing has moved to put our children in a better condition. And then you got a lot of the teachers who don't really care about our children. So they'll sit back and let the children do everything they want to do. Like that classroom I went into, I could tell that's what he did every day. And then when the bell rings, all right, see you later, kids. But we got to be more radical. I mean, I'm sorry to use that term, but you know,
but I think it comes back to why we lost ground and losing grounds because we don't fight, and I don't mean physically fight. I mean we don't fight. We don't put up any. We'll for a little bit we'll march around and we'll have our rallies, and then you get the idiots that come up and want to burn stuff and tear stuff up just because they get the opportunity. but we don't unite. Like, for instance, can you imagine if every African American church got together and took a stance on an issue? You could change this country in a week. If every African American church said, and I say that people laugh when I say, think about if every church got together and said, we're not going to buy Nikes for a month.
Exactly.
If every church got together and says, we're not going to go to Chick-fil-A for a month. We're not going to go to Walmart for a month. You best believe that stuff will change. But we don't do that. It's almost like I'm just going to worry about the few people in my building.
So you hit the nail on the head. It's like it's not coming together as a group. Everybody has their own little individual.
But that used to be the role of the church. The role of the church was the place that brought the community.
No, I'm saying, but now it's not like that. And I don't want to name anybody, but it's like you got some of these people. They live in nice communities. They're doing really well off. Now they're people that's members of their church. Man, they in the neighborhoods. They in the hood, and they may be really struggling. But you living out and.
But I think that's part of the problem.
And I don't want to name anybody.
But I think that's double-edged sword because I think that's part of the problem too because there's no more community churches.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that go to these churches don't live in the community, so they don't have a vested interest. And I think that's another.
You're right.
They don't. They drop into a church and they leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another place we've lost ground. But I also think, for me, my humble opinion, I think, and I know growing up, and I used the churches. I grew up on 33rd and Montgomery. So right at 32nd and Montgomery, it was two churches on a diagonal cross, and there was another church like a block up. They always had something. They were walking around saying, "Come to movie night, hey, we got something." They were always out there inviting you to something positive. They would come stand, because you have respect. You stop playing. They would come stand on the basketball court. You like, come on, man, I'm trying to get this game on. But I mean, the church played that role, for people who didn't have a father, and I'm a father to the fatherless. You could go to the church and you could be involved. You talked about how to God in your community, the community center. Those things, I think, when those things went away, and again, I think, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think on purpose, it's like when you start closing schools and libraries, they're always in those neighborhoods that need it the most.
When we were coming up down in Mantua, we had Mr. Reynolds. I remember him.
Yeah.
He was with the recreation center. Every day he was there late. He signed up, he'd go sign up for basketball, baseball, whatever. And we went down there and played. They kept the lights on in the evening. And we would be playing ball, get a little cool. We'd come down and play ball. They took all of that away. And you know what? Even like I said, even though we had the gang problem, it was still a sort of like a mutual respect. We had West Philadelphia Boys and Girl Club, which was not a place where I was supposed to be able to go. Guess what? We could go down there and play ball. We played in their basketball league all the time, and none of those guys bothered us.
But we didn't fight for it. That's what I'm talking about. How we lost.
And now that's being gentrified. Like I don't know what.
We didn't
Drexel.
fight for it.
I graduated from Drexel University many moons ago. All that area now. I mean, they're coming all the way over to where I'm 38th and Ashland, Fairmount, and all that. You see people that don't look like us walk around. I'm not saying that's a problem.
Oh yeah, it's coming.
And what got me was that one day I was down visiting some friends of mine I grew up with. And this other young lady that doesn't look like us came walking up the street. And she was walking her dog all confident. And I was just like, we could. Now, if it was one of us, I hate to say sometimes, we'll attack one another. And not saying I'm not indicating she should have been attacked. But I'm just saying how it's changing so much. And West Philadelphia Boys and Girl Club, where I played ball and we had the swimming pool, now I found out Drexel owns that now. It's not the communities anymore. Because somebody told me that, and I was actually at work when I was still working on it. They said, West Philadelphia Boys and Girl Club has been sold now. I went, after work, I went to the center, and I walked in, there was this young man, African-American young man. I said, excuse me, is it true that they sold it? He went like this, put his head down, he said.
Well, University of Pennsylvania owns a lot of stuff out there, too.
But
they do stuff in the community. So I'm not saying that in a bad way.
But you know what, though?
They do a lot.
They should do more. There was a, I won't say a rumor, but they were supposed to provide scholarships for inner city youth, meaning us. I don't think that ever happened.
But those are the things I'm talking about, how we lost ground because nobody's galvanizing people, bringing people together to talk about those issues. You're right. We'll get together, organize a parade for for a sports team and nothing flat. We'll attack somebody because of gender or
right.
I mean, we'll attack people because they choose a different lifestyle. But when it comes to issues that impact people and impact generations of people, we just we're stagnant. This goes back to, I think, why we're losing ground and why we've lost ground.
You're right.
And I think
agree.
Because you can't, first of all, civil rights something is going to be ongoing. I don't think civil rights is one of them things that, at least in my lifetime, I don't think it'll ever be something that's not challenged. That's something that we got to, and I think the political climate now, even the church climate now is telling everybody, showing that it's not. But we act like we've arrived. We've act like because we overcame these things that all of a sudden they don't matter anymore. And so because of that, we don't argue when they take stuff out the history books. We don't argue when we don't have books in our schools. We don't argue when there's no technology in our schools.
Right. But it's us, and why do we accept that?
Yeah, how do you galvanize?
You know what I'm saying? It's like when you have hurt.
Yeah.
It's the saying, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
There is no one that has gone through what our people have gone through in this country. And like, I'm going to go back to the Ukraine again. I really have a thing that's I'm fixated on with that. It just bothers me. Don't get me wrong. I understand helping people. Where was that compassion for us?
But I think,
and the injustices that we face and still face, where is that compassion?
I don't think that I understand exactly what you're saying, because I've used that in the conversation as well, and I'm all for. I feel for Ukraine. I pray for Ukraine. It's a travesty, but I say the same thing. I said, you're spending billions of dollars over there, but you got young African diversity. Let's look at it. They just overturned the civil rights for African Americans to go to Harvard. But you send billions of dollars over here, and my thing, nobody's making an uproar. Nobody said, let's get together. That's my point. Stuff just happens, and we don't respond.
But look at this. A lot of those Ivy League schools, who built them?
Yeah.
Who built them?
But which is why that was in the first place, because it was needed. But my point is, we don't argue about it. It's like, I'm a huge NFL fan, but the Rooney Rule is a joke. You put the rule, you have to interview an African American. So they interview them, they know they hired him. They pick the worst guy at the end of the bench who they know is never qualified.
We're going to interview him. And you could be overqualified and say, I'm sorry, you didn't get the position.
So I think, but that's what we become as a country, and we become silent. There's a definite silence for people who have a voice, who should be using a voice.
But you know what? It's always been like that. I remember when I was at Drexel with the co-op program, I got my first co-op was at the Corps of Engineers, and there were 2 black women working. They were like secretaries. And you know what they said to me when I got there? They said, oh my goodness. They actually stepped up and they told management, all of your co-op students, we never see we know it's black students at Drexel. Yeah. Why do you never have black co-op? I was the first one.
Yeah. Been that role before.
And they looked out for me the whole time I was there.
But we need to do more things like that. But I don't know why, but even we don't exercise our voices. And so we have lost ground. If you look at the educational system now versus when we were in school, it's worse.
Oh, much worse. It's much worse.
But that's my point. When I hear people talk about we haven't, think about that. How in all technology, it should never be worse. Your education system should be evolving with technology. Some of the buildings we went to school in, it's still out there. It's still operating.
Dobbins in particular.
It's still operating. Well, I laugh at Dobbins because they closed down the 8th floor because they say it's a fire hazard.
They did close down the 8th?
How many times you been up there and set up an 8th floor? And now all of a sudden there's a fire hazard because nothing can reach. So if they can't reach it now,
they couldn't reach it
when we were in there.
Right.
So, but I'm saying, schools are getting worse, and we're not challenging it. We're sitting back and we're picking our battles.
So how do you galvanize people or get them to understand that we're in crisis? Because we're in crisis.
I think we talked about before you came in. What we talked about, Devin, was how there's a large group of men who are hurting and going through things. I think you start by healing some of these men, because you can't galvanize an army with a bunch of people that's already wounded. That fight ain't gonna last long. So, because sooner or later your wound's gonna catch up with you. So I think you start by healing people. You start with small groups. You help them through the issues, and then while you help them through the issues, you help them discover their purpose. Like, your purpose is Martin Luther King. One of my favorite speeches. I can't think of the name of it. I used some of it when I was in Mexico. In one of his speeches, he talks about that. The speech where he says, "If you can't be a shrub, you can be a tree." But it's a part of the speech that they never play. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing. He says, the day is going to come, when you're going to think, you'll be measured by your material things. Not that day. The day is going to come when you think you're going to be measured by your houses and stocks and bonds. Not that day.
Right.
And he goes on. Then he says, but ultimately the day is going to come. You'll be measured by what have you done for somebody else. And I think that's the problem. That's not our attitude now. Our attitude now is me. And I think that is permeating to the church as well, to all these organizations where we now, instead of being utilitarian, we think of for the greater good, we stuck on me and I.
It's all about self, man. Selfishness.
Yeah, but I think that's why we've lost ground, because if you can take the strongest group of people and divide them, you can beat them.
Divide and conquer.
You can
That's
beat
the easiest thing to
But
do.
I think you start with healing some of these men. And I think after you start with healing the men, because once you start healing men, you can start healing relationships. And once you start healing relationships, you can start healing families. And once you start doing that, now you can start educating them. Now you can start teaching them different things. But it's hard to take somebody, and I'm not making excuses, who is starving and hurting them and tell them you want to put them into a battle that they don't see impacts them directly.
You know, I think they have to emphasize more on the relationship between man and woman, you know, especially with these men. And they don't do, well, let's put it like this. I've talked to a lot of brothers and we have our little meetings, and it's like, it appears they favor more so the female agenda than what's going on with us.
Well, but the system is set up like that. I used to work for the Housing Authority, and I was amazed at the way the system was set up. The way the system is set up, and it may have changed, I doubt it, you rewarded for not having a man in the house.
Yeah. Right.
You know, you got more benefits, you got more help, you got more assistance.
Right.
If you put a man, even if he was only making minimum wage, you got zapped.
Well, remember that movie years ago? What was it, Claudine?
Claudine. James Earl Jones, Diane Carroll.
He had to go hide in the closet. So they made it so.
Well, they weren't going to get married because she didn't lose the benefits.
That's my point. Rather than helping the entire family, no, we got to have the man gone, and we'll just help the women. So then women, in my opinion, they got to this point like, whoa, hey, I can get this. I don't need no man. And then that's where the disrespect, in my opinion, comes in.
But it's on purpose, because even if you look at the court system, they don't tell you to spend time with your kid. They just say, make sure you send a check. They don't ask you how much time you spend.
As long as you send that check, you good.
So what happens is, on the other side of the coin, not all females, but some females get used to the check, and they thinking in their minds, I'm surviving, not realizing the impact it's having on their kids. They don't have a man around. That nobody's teaching their boy how to be, and they don't have the protection and cover. And I'm not talking about physical protection, the protection and cover they need, because I know Christian males who struggle in their relationships because of the same thing, because she wants to be the boss.
Women, but here's the thing.
She wants to be in charge.
If I'm the man in the house and I have a daughter, I'm going to teach her what it is, what a real man is.
Of course, yeah.
So now you have these young ladies out there with all kind of Tom, whatever, Dick, Harry, and everything else.
Tomfoolery.
Because they don't know what a real man is.
But
and then they see some of them, they see their mothers dealing with these all types of individuals.
And some of the stuff they say.
How are they going to learn anything positive?
And again, I'm not making excuses, but it's some of the stuff they say. When you look just like your father, he was no good.
Oh yeah, they say negative stuff about dad.
Your dad was trifling, you're gonna be trifling. You just like the stuff that you hear say. Or I was at Transilli's about 2 months ago. And this lady's coming across the street. She must have called this little boy MF. And then somebody said, well, ma'am, you really shouldn't talk to your son like that. That ain't my effing son.
Wow.
Yeah, but like it was still okay.
Wow.
So everybody around just swirled around like, but she was just all the way across the street. So how you think that boy is going to turn out if that's all he knows?
Wait a minute, you made me think about, I was going in ShopRite in Delaware County, and these young girls are riding the scooters around. They're like maybe 12, 13. And they were blocking the exit so people couldn't get out. So people were in line trying to get out, and the gentleman kept saying, excuse me, ladies. So I said to him, excuse me, young ladies. When I said, excuse me, young ladies, the people are trying to get out. And they said, oh. So they rode the scooters over the corner, and they got off, and they were giggling. No big deal. We didn't have no confrontation.
Yeah.
I didn't know their mother was standing behind me. As I'm walking in the market, she cursed me out for saying something to her daughters about, the cart. And all I said, the people can't get through. I couldn't believe that.
I can't.
That's a neat.
And then I looked at the way, no disrespect, I looked at the way she was dressed too, and I was like, wow, you're not showing these young ladies how to.
But I think, and I say this, and we lost ground because, first of all, every female is not a lady.
Right.
And I think that part needs to be examined. It's like when people says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing. Every lady is not a wife. And folk need to understand that. Just like every man is not going to be a husband.
Right, exactly.
And I think, but we get so used to saying stuff and nobody digs deeper down and say, okay, well, let's examine what does it mean to be a husband? What does it mean to be a wife? So now if you got two people who are dysfunctional, they passing down dysfunction.
Yeah, you can't help but have dysfunction.
But if you got two people who are disjointed, and don't know their history, what can they pass down? If you raise in a house, and we talked about it, unless something happens, you follow the norm. The norm is if everybody around you selfish, you selfish.
Right.
And again, I'm not bashing the church. I won't make it abundantly clear, but we just go, maybe because I'm coming across so many hurting people, men who attend buildings.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about not in a building.
No, I
is
know
that
what you
this
mean.
message between the sin and salvation, we don't cover the in
You're
between.
supposed to be healing people, helping people.
Yeah,
That's what it's supposed to be.
and you're supposed to do it so in turn because it becomes generational. Because if I help Devin, Devin hopefully will marry somebody. That's how the gospel grows. But also, that's how people grow.
Mhm.
That's how people become better people. That's how people become good citizens and contribute, positively to society. But that's not happening.
But you know what? Even pushing against churches, pushing with politics and things like that.
Yeah.
I have a theory. This is my theory, Gary's.
We got 9 minutes, guys.
That nonprofit status, it's almost like a little chain on you. Don't get too out of control with what you say. That 501c3 thing, because if they had to pay taxes on the revenue they were bringing in, that would be a setback, so to speak.
But this all goes back to lack of unity. Because if they all got together, that couldn't happen. Because you know what? First of all, there's enough churches that we can have our own politicians. There's enough churches that you can have Christian politicians if that is the true desire.
Right.
So I'm saying, if everybody got together and said, this is the standard we're going to raise, and one, and I don't want to, I trust Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior and everything.
Yes.
So you can't tell me you trust him and then you worried about something like that going on.
Right.
See, so I think
Right.
you got to kind of figure it out. But going back to the issue now is that the church needs to be the beacon that light the difference. And that's not happening because, it's great messages. I'm not knocking it. There's some great messages. I hear them, but we're not getting into, Devin, how you living.
There has to be a follow through.
We're not getting into, okay, Devin, you wavering in your faith. So how can we walk with you to get there? It's like everybody comes in, you hear this great word, everybody goes home. It's not like, guys will tell me, because I ask them, well, are you talking to people? Well, I don't really want to have this conversation because I don't want my business in the church. And I understand them, but that's a shame. I had somebody tell me not to. I had somebody tell me that they went to their pastor. A young lady told me she was struggling with her sexual identity. So she goes to her pastor, he counsels her. She hears it. He didn't mention her name, but he said he got him preached about it. So she don't go to church anymore.
That's another thing. That's not.
So he didn't say her name, but she knew.
Right. And other people might have known also. But
these are things why I think, and I'm talking about because we're talking about galvanizing. You got to have, for lack of a better term, a lightning rod. You got to have one place that you can't have 15 different people going 15 different directions trying to create a movement. A movement starts with one thing, one common idea, one goal, whatever it is, and it begins to attract people, and the people jump on, and that's how the movement goes.
But you know what I look at? Martin Megger and Martin, those are guys that were galvanizing people together, and they said, "Wow." I think a lot of people now are afraid to really be that, come on, with that image, because it says, I don't want to end up like those gentlemen ended up. And we shouldn't have to have that fear. And that's why we should have to galvanize as a people and support our people and be really there.
But I think you can,
because Malcolm and King, they got together, they were talking.
But that's why it ended the way it ended.
Yeah.
Because that would have been definitely changing.
Definitely.
But even in that sense, we didn't figure that out.
Wait a minute, but look at even with Malcolm with the Nation of Islam, the things he found out, he was like, whoa. And he went on in, he went up kind of separating himself.
Full circle, education.
Yeah.
Full circle. It goes back to education. I think, it's something that we don't value. And we have to figure out how to re-engage.
So my question is, what do we do?
Well, first you got to,
what do we really do as a collective? It's like the small groups of us who are really trying to do things. I guess we have to just come together and do what we can do.
Well, this is and I don't have to answer everything, but part of it is you got to make yourself available.
Right.
And I think we've not done a good job of making ourselves available.
Right.
You got to make yourself available. You got to, you can't be hiding in these walls and showing up just on Sunday and just talking to each other and kind of picking your favorite thing to do. You got to make yourself available. I think the second thing is you got to find commonality. You can't attract people and it's all about you.
Oh,
you
yeah.
got to find something to draw.
Yeah.
You got to find something.
We all have.
You got to find some interest. It's like if you're dating somebody.
Mhm.
It ain't gonna last if it's all about one of y'all and there's nothing in common between the two of you.
That's
So
selfish, right?
Yeah, but I think we've adopted that you're gonna
You're
come
right.
on my terms. You're coming on my terms.
What are you doing for me?
Yeah,
You got to
yeah.
be doing something.
You
You ain't
know,
doing nothing for me.
But you got people, you have people who are hurting because of
Mhm.
divorce, because of death,
Yeah.
or just because of some in strife in their marriage that they can't work out, because people have baggages, whatever the situation is. Sometimes it's over their kids.
But you know what? Sometimes, before I retired, I had a lot of young people that worked with me,
Yeah.
and they would come and talk to me and share things. One young man, he was going to law school. I never knew. I'm going through the turnstile, leaving the building, and they called me Mr. G. He said, Mr. G, Mr. G. And he came to me and said, look, man, I aced my law exam. And I had no idea. I told him, congratulations, keep up the good work. And we stay in communications.
But there's a lot. See, this goes back to the whole initial conversation, how we started was, but that's the kind of people or the kind of kid, young man
Mhm.
that you need to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
And not always hear about the one who's killing people.
Right.
And this goes back to how the narrative, how we lost ground because of the narrative. Because you said it the way African American men are depicted, but even the way marriage is depicted.
Mhm.
It's funny because when I had the opportunity to share the gospel in Mexico, my topic was this thing called life. And in my research, did you know that for the last 9 years, the life expectancy of men has dropped a year?
Wow. I could believe
It
that.
went from
I
85
could
to
believe that.
76. Every year for the past 9 years, not male, human beings,
Yeah.
we lost a year. We lost a year.
Yeah.
And there's things like stress,
Oh, yeah.
lack eating, that's not even counting the burden and everything else. But these are things, and this goes back to my point, how whether it's church, whether it's school, whether it's organizations, we got to start teaching folk how to live. Stop teaching folk how to survive.
Mhm.
Stop teaching folk how to get ready to go to heaven. Because it's funny because we are called to occupy. And when you occupy something, you're there.
Mhm.
In order to occupy something, you got to be able to hold it and keep it. And how you hold it and keep it, you put your fingerprints on it.
We got to be in the community. Like we have a town watch we do. And on Friday, I'm going to do the town watch. It's only a handful of us. But when we walk through the community, you might see a guy standing on the corner. We know something kind of, you know what they do? They'll respect us or whatever. Something. How you doing, gentlemen? We don't say anything about it. We just say, how you doing? We keep walking because we got vests on to identify ourselves. But the neighbors, they're sitting on the porch. Oh, thank you, gentlemen, for what you do. I feel good about that because I feel like I'm giving something back. And they appreciate it.
So we got 2 minutes left. You can
Okay.
Well, this is a wonderful conversation. I wish I would have came in the beginning to kind of get the full experience, but definitely have taken away a lot of great information and just great key talking points just to take away from this. So this was awesome. I liked it. I think we should have another conversation on this personally, just so I can get the full effect.
So you're looking to do a part 2, huh?
Yeah, we need a part 2.
That sounds good.
All right, man. Again, this is Chris Pender. We thank you for another great episode of Above Average Black Men. My dear friend, I want to say Dr. Gary Bryant, but we'll join this, and we definitely get a part 2.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So remember to do what?
Yeah, like, follow, subscribe, share, comment, interact with us. Above Average Black Men.
Yes.